Welcome to the WPAOG podcast. On today's episode, join us for an inspiring episode with Sam Kazmer, class of 2011, and Devin T. Adams, class of 2013. From West Point to business owners, they've seamlessly blended military precision with an entrepreneurial flair. This episode features Sam and Devin sharing stories of their respective startups, from the disciplined world of the academy to the creative chaos of startups. They've mastered the art of strategic leadership to create successful businesses in Atlanta and New York City. Enjoy this episode featuring Sam Kazmer and Devin T. Adams.
I'm Devin T. Adams and class of 2013. Happy to be here with my good buddy, Sam Kazmer.
Sam Kazmer, class of 2011.
Did you ever imagine all those years ago that we'd be on a West Point Association of Graduates podcast, brother?
No. Yeah, I just think back to the first time that we met and how much different things are now, but still very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So to bring everybody in, so Sam and I met on an AIAD, or Academic Individual Advanced Development course by the Lefke Fellowship in China. We were going into studying Chinese as our language as sophomores. And yeah, we went on a trip to China for 2 weeks with 5 other cadets with OIC who had just graduated 2 days before we left. So he graduated. Eddie Kang, 08. Amazing guy. Graduated on Saturday and took us all to China on Monday. So needless to say, it was a fantastic experience and one that was very memorable for me. I remember just always thinking like, wow, that's how much trust that West Point has in its system and its ability to train leaders, that they graduated this guy on Saturday and sent like 7 kids with him.
A bunch of 19-year-olds.
A bunch of 19-year-olds on Monday. So I was always impressed by that. So, and then all those years, I was in 2008? So
yeah, that was summer of 08.
So now 16 years later, we're here. And so happy to get to talk about our careers and kind of how our paths have, we're disconnected and then connected again. So I guess I'll start first though, way back then and say, okay, like, how did you hear about West Point in the first place? And why did you want to go there?
Yeah, for me, I didn't have any family that was really in the military. We had a family friend at the church I went to at the time. And he was a Vietnam veteran, a Delta pilot, flew like F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam. And I was just 15 or 16, probably 15 at the time, trying to figure out what I was going to do for college. And my dad and I decided that we were going to go check out all the academies because this guy seemed to think that it could be a decent option and it wasn't going to cost any money. So it came from a very pragmatic standpoint initially. And then I went up and visited, like I said, all the academies. West Point was the one that definitely stood out to me. I did the thing where you follow a cadet around for a day. And it was just such a foreign experience compared to like going and visiting UGA. I did all the ROTC scholarships too. So I went and visited couple schools that I was thinking for that. And kind of just, I'm a firm believer in like shotgun blasting. So I like to just push out as much stuff as I can, put a lot of like lines in the water and see what comes up. Ended up getting a nomination to West Point and then Air Force as well, and a few ROTC scholarships, but decided that West Point was the direction I wanted to go. It seemed like the most extreme experience, at least of all the academies, and then certainly compared to ROTC. So I was like, I'm going to go to try to do this thing. And if it doesn't work, I can leave and just go to University of Georgia or something. And, I graduated, so I clearly stayed. But yeah, I was telling Devin that the first night that I was at Beast, I was literally just crying in my bed. And I was like, what am I doing? And but that was the only night I cried because I was like, well, I'm here. I got to keep going. So, it was pretty wild. I'm even getting emotional now.
Yeah, it's a crazy night. It was a very hot summer that summer too. I remember about Beast. Yeah. The most was that I was sweating from the time that we started all the way through, like
Oh
through
yeah,
until we got
constantly.
done with Beast. Like for me, I came from a similar situation. I'm from Alabama, you're from Georgia, and kind of pragmatic in the same way. I came from an Air Force family. A lot of my family had served in the different armed forces. And when I was in like ninth grade, I found out about the academies. I'm like, wow, it's free. They pay you. It's well respected. I looked at the Princeton Review and it was all on all the good lists, all the lists that I thought like, the best colleges, best professors, most accessible. They weren't partying at the time, right? I'm a good church boy in Alabama. I'm like, I don't want to go to a party school. I want to go somewhere where they're like getting to it. Because what I remember the most when I was younger was just really wanting to be a leader and feeling like, there was these leadership institutions and all these great leaders had these different schools and places where I was like, oh, that's where they learned to, get better at that thing. And so I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy for forever until I went to visit West Point the first time. I was with Dave White, class of 09, who's actually a deputy director of the Peace Corps right now. And his little brother, Dan's 2012. I stayed with Dave and I ended up staying like for the day. And then he was like, hey, you want to just stay the night? Because we were staying the night. And I just remember everybody being so welcoming and just being like, man, this is such a challenging experience, but we love it. And like only come here if you really are just interested in a huge challenge. And like, there's going to be something that you're not very good at. Especially at that time, I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at everything. And they're like, nah, man.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
They're like, no way, bro. You're going to get killed. It's going to be bad. And and I was really impressed by the experience. And then I went to summer leaders experience as well. And it was like Air Force and West Point back to back. And the camaraderie and the people that I met at SLE were just fantastic. And I was just like, hey, I want to go to school with people like this. And so I was really happy. And then we got to plebe year. And yeah, I didn't cry because I knew I'd asked for this, but I did wonder on an everyday basis whether like I was as good at any of these stuff as I thought I was, right? I came in thinking like, oh, I'm going to be first captain, no brainer. I'm going to crush it. And then in Beast, I was like, whoa, I'm getting crushed.
I'm going to get crushed.
I'm getting crushed. Beast 1, I was a soup sandwich, as they say. I was getting rocked, man. And I had done like ROTC and CAP and all this stuff. So I thought that I was like on top of it. I was not on top of anything.
There was some point during that experience, though, like maybe after a couple weeks where I was just like, well, I'm definitely going to stay here because I had started making very good friends. I think I went a different route. I found that, man, if I was quiet and just did really well and ran fast and like memorized the knowledge, they would just leave me alone. And so my route was like just perform and don't talk a whole lot. And don't ever be the guy in the very front, but don't ever be the guy in the very back, especially at the beginning. And even now, like I've carried that, like I'll still be in the front now because I run a business, but I definitely stay a little bit back so I can kind of watch what's happening. And I try not to just always be out front because typically that person gets domed.
Yeah, for sure. No, and we were in the same Beast platoon. And I was the guide on for like the first week or two.
Yep.
And I volunteered like a fool, right? And yeah, no doubt. I would say I definitely was getting yelled at a ton. And I did a lot of push-ups with that guide on. It was not fun. I immediately regretted it. The moment they handed it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I ask for? Or like to be in the front on the runs holding the guide on. I was like, am I in this good a shape to be doing this?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like one of the things that impressed me the most too about West Point was like, you just have to deal with it though. Like I asked for the guide on, they gave it to me. And that's it. Like keep up with the commander while you're running on the guide on. And like, that's it. Like, I can't fall out holding the company colors. Like that's.
You're there. Like, we were talking about this too the other night where it's like, it's just, this, my realization after the first night, it's like, well, I'm here. So this is my current allocation in life. I need to perform and do the best that I can with what I've got. I put myself here. I mean, it carries over into business. I feel like last year was horrible, and at least with business and just with the economy, and we were opening a second place, and I was dealing with, some financial issues with the business that I simply had never experienced before and could have never planned for. And it was one of those similar situations to where I'm like, this is where I am. I gotta navigate through this. It's nobody's fault. This is just the way things are. And if it's anybody's fault, it's my own. And so, yeah, just kind of driving forwards, living it one day at a time. And like at West Point, that's kind of what you had to do when things got very hard. I remember in my second year, in my sophomore year, I think I had something like 21 credit hours. And those credit hours were just, none of them were like fake classes, because I took Chinese my first year, I had to push chemistry onto the second year. And so in my second year, I'm taking second level Chinese. I was in like the Jedi math classes. So I'm in like calculus 3 and differential equations, physics and chemistry. And then I also started taking some of my major courses. And I remember sitting down and like writing it all in my planner and just once again, like being like, how am I going to do this? And then just kind of every day making incremental progress towards whatever that goal was. And that goal was just getting through the semester. Typically at West Point, it was a matter of, at least during the school year, it was like just trying to get through the academic course load. Because the academics there are just, it's in your lower level classes, it was always very regimented and structured. But over time, you had a little bit more choice in it all. But it didn't matter if you were choosing things or if they were choosing them for you. It just seemed like there was never enough time in the day to get it all done. And so you just kind of had to know that ahead of time. I've carried that over to my life, which is why I have like 5,000 unread emails, because like to me, it's like the unread email is, if it's not read, it's not important to me. And so I don't have time in my day to do that. And when I explain this to my wife, Sara, she's very different from me. She's got to get everything done on the checklist, which is good because somebody in this business needs to. But I got rid of that thinking a long time ago, which is why I'm good at my job and why she's good at her job. I can't let my brain bandwidth, like there's only so much I can care about each day. And if I spend all of that opening text messages and emails that aren't important, then like the next project for the brewery or, if I've got something going on more important in my personal life, then that stuff's not going to get taken care of. And that's something I learned at West Point for sure. Because it's like, do I need to read this chapter or do I need to do this problem set? I don't have enough time tonight to do both.
Well, yeah. I think the biggest thing that when I look back at it, I thought of it all as a challenge when we were in it, right? It was like, oh man, this is so difficult. But now that I look back, really what we were learning to do was to multitask and triage, right? Where you're like, okay, this problem set's worth 100 points and that's XYZ% of the class versus I should read this chapter, but like today, technically, it's not worth any percentages of my class, right? Like I know I need to get to it, but for sure we need to like ensure that the problem set is done in a good way. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've seen for me and developing my company and the brands. And I guess we'll take an aside for a second, just kind of talk about what we do and then we can talk more about how our training has really helped us to develop our stuff. So I'll talk about mine really quick. I own a company called What's a Roadblock Beverage Company that specializes in brand building for beverage companies of all sorts. And so we just brought 2 spirits to market and we're selling in major metropolitan areas in New York and California at the moment and trying to build more clients as we go along. And so that process, we're about 3 years deep in developing those brands and so many different things that have to go into it. And then Sam, for you, talk a little bit about what you do.
I'm the CEO and co-founder of Elsewhere Brewing Company. Probably, I would say the thought process for this probably started back in 2017 with me and my wife. Did like a 1.5 year long travel through the States, Mexico, South America, and Europe, kind of developing the brand and the concept behind all of that. We got our first location in Atlanta opened in October of 2020. And then we got a second location opened up in September of last year. And then in addition to that, we brew craft beer at the Grant Park facility. We have a distiller's permit, so we also have the ability to purchase bulk spirits and blend spirits and cocktails. We have the ability to distill down the line if that's something we decide to do. And then kind of in addition to those businesses, my wife, Sara, and I have started kind of an adventure travel company called the Elsewhere Adventure Club. We did our first trip down to Patagonia last year with like 14 guests and did just a pretty epic thing there. And then we're going to do another one this year in Oaxaca, and then hopefully Patagonia next year again. And then I'm also kind of working third business where we're recycling some of our grain, upcycling it to grow lion's mane mushrooms on. So that's kind of a new project I've got going. But that's just kind of an overview of, I guess I'm kind of becoming a serial entrepreneur out of necessity. Always trying to find ways to make my business recession proof if that's possible.
That's right. We're always tinkering with it, trying to at least, get the outcomes that you're going after. For me, we have the brand. So I invested with Sam and Sara years ago. Me and Sam have been talking about getting into this space for a long time. And honestly, working on the brands elsewhere is really what inspired me to get deeper into the industry, and really where I saw a need for burgeoning entrepreneurs who want to get into our industry that have a really difficult understanding of what's behind the wall of the giant barriers to entry to the industry. But in order to guide people through that, I had to make my own brand first. So Malamia Mezcal is our brand, and that we've been pushing forward. And I would say that in my experience with building my brand, there's so many things that I took from my time, both as a platoon leader and also as a cadet, that really helped me so much. And I think the big three things for me was that I really learned at West Point how to visually multitask, like through my planner, right? I used to love that planner. Was like the best thing in the world. I put all my tests, at the beginning of the semester, I'd take all my syllabi and take, all the big important dates and write them all on my like macro calendar. And then by the week, starting to track. That's something I never did in high school, but it was such a great habit to start as soon as I got to West Point. And like, that's something that to this day, I am like, if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. I don't even know. I don't know it exists. Like if you told me you were going to call me, you got to put it on my calendar. So I just like am tracking that's happening. Otherwise, I think it's free space. I'm going to be doing something. I'm going to be walking in the park. I'm going to be chilling, doing something else. But what about you? What do you think is your number one thing you took from West Point or your time as a cadet that helped with the business?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like definitely the planning and thinking about what the next best step will be to create that incremental progress forwards. I always go back to I like some of the stuff you learn at West Point and IOB or infantry basic and stuff like that, Ranger school. And then at your platoon leader time, you're just like, man, like the TLPs, like why is this important? And it just structures, it creates, when you're starting your own business, there's no like pipeline. There's no framework. You have to build the framework. You have to build the scaffold.
Yeah.
So if you have no like example for that, you don't really know where to start. And so I think TLPs and just kind of like.
And what are the TLPs for the people that may have forgotten them?
Troop leading procedures.
There we go.
So yeah, troop leading procedures. And so basically like I look at the business like a gigantic operation.
Me too.
And sometimes that's bad because then I start putting it into like life and death circumstances and I might have like a mental breakdown and then have to remind myself that like if this doesn't get done the way I want it to get done, like I'm not going to die. We're not going to die.
Yeah. 100%.
But yeah, the TLPs, like I still, I still will talk to people in the company and it'll be like, all right, we're receiving the mission. Like I'm going to go conduct some reconnaissance. And like, I kind of say it jokingly, but it's amazing how many times it like lines up. And it just really helps me think, in larger time frames. So like, for example, last year when I'm trying to think about how I can make my business sustainable, there's like 15 to 30 things that need to get done. And they're all huge monumental tasks, like renegotiating leases, renegotiating loans with the bank, dealing with like hiring and firing people, adjusting like salary. It's like, these are like really complicated, big problems that don't get solved like in a week or a month or even like a quarter. It takes like a year. And so in order to like have the patience to see the plan through, you kind of have to be able to visualize like what the process could look like, and always remember what the end state is that you're going towards, and adjusting the plan along the way to continue that trajectory going towards what the desired end state is, and what commander's intent, all that stuff. Just the balance of tactical pause and action, that was a big thing, especially. That's more so kind of like on the deployments and stuff. Maybe if you're in a firefight and just kind of, establishing a base of fire and trying to gather data, figure out what's happening and what the next best step would be. But yeah, I think just, learning how to take in information, structure that information in a way that can help build a plan to achieve an end state. That's right there. That's kind of what I'd say I learned that at West, applied it in the military, and I'm applying it in the civilian world now.
I totally agree. And
small business, yeah.
And to give some color to our careers, I was an FA officer, 173rd, 82nd, did a lot of fire support officer duties, and you were an infantry officer, right?
Yeah, I was an infantry officer. Went to Italy after IOBC, Ranger School, Airborne School. Deployed with them once, and then went to the 2nd Ranger Battalion after that, and deployed a couple times with them. And then, I ended up getting medically discharged because I was in a parachuting crash with 275 during like an airfield seizure exercise. So that's ultimately what like the catalyst for me to start really thinking what the next step was going to be. Because before that, I was thinking I was just going to go up and work in finance or something. And then that gigantic crash into the earth made me kind of rethink all of that, and kind of led to where we are today.
Yeah, amazing. I'd love to talk about too, just as an aside about Ranger School for a second. I think we said our first thing for you is the troop leading procedures. From you is just the idea of multitasking visually. I think my second thing is probably something I learned in my journey through trying to get my tab. I went to Ranger School 3 times ultimately. I went twice to the RTAC, or like the National Guard pre-Ranger, which is I still think may have been harder than Ranger School. But I went to that twice, felt push-ups, went back to Italy, had to work my way back up, and then went back to Ranger School. But in that process, one of the things I learned a lot was just about, hey man, the standard is a standard, and you're either the standard or you're not the standard, right? And so a lot of what we have to do in business, especially coming in as a small business owner, you're coming into these large marketplaces, right? There's a lot of business going on already, but you have to come in and you have to compete, and you have to get your brands and your kind of ecosystem ready to be sustainable in the marketplace. I think from my experience at the Ranger School of continuously seeking after something, even when I was met with the fact that I wasn't prepared, or I didn't prepare enough, or I wasn't adequate at that time, has really helped me in my business life too, to take the time to prepare back in the rear, right? Before we get to the show, I'm
the will
thinking
to
about
prepare,
it.
as Scott Wilkins would say. Prepare.
That's right. The will to prepare. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Yeah. So I would say the will to prepare. Yeah. Just really holding yourself accountable for like, hey, it's my responsibility to put out the best product that I can under my brand and for my business and for our ecosystem. Talk to me about, one of the lessons that you learned that you feel like in Ranger School that's really been helpful to your journey now.
Yeah, I mean, just grinding away and rowing. I remember, this was before Ranger School, but I remember being this is a West Point thing. I remember that first 10-mile ruck march during Beast. And I remember looking at my squad leader, and he looked like he was not suffering as much as me. And I was like this just must get easier, right? Like your back must not hurt, right? He's just like, nope, doesn't get easier. So how do you keep going? It's like, you just get used to it sucking. Like, as you just get used to it, and your new baseline is much higher than it was before. That's Ranger School. I mean, how tired and hungry and just generally physically exhausted you think you can get more. Mm-hmm. You can get more. You can get all the way till you're you die. Like, and it's like Ranger School made me realize that like, oh, I can just like keep rowing a lot longer than I thought. And it also made me realize that like everyone gets tired and everyone is struggling with the same problems I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just keep moving, then you will probably outrun almost everybody else. So that's a big thing that I took into the business, because you spend a majority of your days kind of like somewhere between questioning what you're doing with your life and feeling sorry for yourself. And so having that kind of that mental framework to pull yourself out of that destructive loop is a combination of just, for me, it's a combination of what all the hard stuff I've done in the past, and then those mental tools that you kind of acquire just through doing really hard stuff most of your life, So
yeah, 100%. I think that the more hard stuff you do, like the more of where we are now too. A lot. I think 2023 was a hard year for me too. Part of what I have to do a lot is obviously fundraising for my business, for the startup. I've been fortunate that the West Point community, we have a lot of old grad investors that put a lot of trust in me. And so that's been great because we speak the same language. I've been able to be like, listen, this is where we are in the battlefield. This is like where we are in the mission, right? Like everything before us is taken care of. Now we just have these things in front of us and we're marking it down. And it really helps to have that common language for sure. So, okay. You touched on it briefly, but you had a parachute crash in 275, and that is what led to your transition. So, I think you alluded to some of these things, but can you talk to us a little bit more about the travels that you and Sarah went on, kind of that transitionary period, and kind of how that inspired, or what you were thinking about during that time as you transitioned?
Yeah, I think everybody that gets out of the military kind of goes through this, right? Like you're leaving a very established and structured world. And then I would say most graduates end up into another very structured world. I didn't do that. You didn't do that. Like I entered into the least structured world that was possible. And like I was saying earlier, it was a matter of like, well, how can I make this a little more structured? And so, I went through the whole med board process. I'd broken my leg, my pelvis, and part of my back. And really just the first step was like, let's get the body and the mind strong again. And, that took probably 2 years. So the crash happened in 2015 and I got out of the military in the beginning of 2017. And I think like for Sara and myself, we weren't really sure what the end state was other than like a craft brewery as we knew it out in Washington State. So in our mind, it was like, okay, we need to kind of like develop the situation. Like what, we need to learn about what is going to make a successful brewery. So once again, we're going back to the TLPs, like we're developing the situation, and like the traveling was simply a 1.5 to 2 year long process of conducting reconnaissance in my brain. And it was also in a way, I knew that this was going to be pretty rough just starting a business because everyone said it would be. And I had no frame of reference of what that was, how hard that was going to be. So I felt like we needed to train ourselves as individuals and then also as a couple to kind of be able to withstand the intensity of what we were about to venture out on. So a bit of like hardship training. So like Sara and I built a little platform in the back of my truck and we drove around the United States and visited breweries and slept in the back of the truck and went backpacking in national parks and then parked the truck at my parents' house. And then we just started basically living on like $30 to $50 a day in Mexico and South America off of my VA disability.
Wow.
And so that right there was like, kind of just getting us mentally prepared for what the financial constraints of the beginning stages of entrepreneurship looked like. And then during that trip, we would just like shotgun blast like 30 emails out to all the breweries we could find in like Bogota, Medellin, various places in Chile and Argentina. And so we were trying to like develop the brand. We're like, what is this? My wife Sara's background is in marketing and branding, and she was like, we need to be able to, if we want this to be a real thing, then we needed to have a real story. And so for us, it was a matter of kind of gathering the information, learning what the industry was all about, learning what people were doing to be successful. So just kind of gathering that data and then using that information to help define what we wanted to be so that we could start to create a more clear end state. And so when we left on that trip in, I want to say like May or June of 2017, and we got back to Georgia where we were planning on opening the brewery for a number of just kind of market opportunity reasons. I'm from the Atlanta area. I felt like we could raise some capital here. And so we got back in 2018 and then basically spent a little bit more time on the ground, kind of getting the ground truth in Atlanta as to what the beer scene looked like, and then started writing our business plan to truly kind of define what Elsewhere Brewing Company was going to be. And then basically had that complete in March of 2019. And then it was a matter of, like you said, trying to find financing to take that idea of what the end state was and then try to translate it into reality. Your approach was quite interesting. Like you, and to be honest, like I remember when you first started down the entrepreneurial path, and I remember the questions you had and some of the excitement you had, and you were like, we're going to be doing it like this, and this. And it's funny to just like you've learned everything kind of for yourself and in a different way because you're in a different industry and you're dealing with different types of problems. But it was fun to watch you kind of like go down some of these roads and be like, nah. And then 100%. Like multiple roads and like, nah. And then the one that you landed on ultimately, and to be honest, like I remember when you came back here last year or 2 years ago with some of those bottles that you had designed, the Mala Mia bottles, and then some of the liquid and like some of the mezcal. I was just like, all right, like I think he figured it. You didn't have it all figured. None of us have it all figured out. But I was like, you got enough of this figured out you have enough momentum now. You need that momentum. You need that like good brand and good product for anyone to take you seriously. And I was like, oh, you've got enough of this right now for the ball to keep rolling.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that because, so again, for the listeners, Sam and I have had so since we were at West Point, we had a crazy experience where we kind of separated. We ended up back in Italy both, but we missed each other by about 2 months when Sam was going to 275 and I had just gotten to Italy. So we missed each other there, but we kind of, in the conversations leading up, of course, I'm like, hey, bro, what's going on over there? What do I need to know? How can I be prepared? And it was kind of able to reconnect then. So I was aware of, Sara, the trip. I came out to Germany and saw you guys randomly enough. And yeah, so for me, when I got out of the military, my last assignment was at West Point. I worked in the admissions department, which was a fantastic experience for me. I always love giving back. And I had started like a little Airbnb business in New York City while I was traveling a lot for that job. And I really saw some opportunity in the short-term rental space at that time in 2018. So I kind of expanded out. And that was when I ran my first business, like my first big boy business where we were making money. But I always tell people that like my experience from that year, we probably did about $800,000 in revenue, which is great. But I was making money, but it wasn't a business. You know what I mean? It wasn't a very sophisticated, it was, sophisticated as me, a couple of cleaners, my laptop and whatnot. And so I really, from that experience, wanted to I did the same thing, actually. So I didn't want to go from institution to institution either. That was like my big thing, like personally, like I think after a while, when I was in my younger 20s, I didn't mind. But as I got older, I kind of felt the presence of the Army a bit more. And I was like, hey, I don't know. I think I want to have less of that. And so I went in 2018 and really always say that I lowered myself back down to the bottom of the well because sometimes a lot of the pressure about business, about our lives and careers, just like you said earlier, comes from this kind of life and death scenario if you don't get what you want. But ultimately, sometimes it's it's very peaceful to understand and go back to something basic. Like you were saying, spending $30 a day. I was making, barely any money, spending barely any money, taking the bus, hawking my, my laundry from my Airbnbs all around and really living, a kind of a very, very impoverished life technically. Right. But ultimately, Spartan life. There we go. But ultimately you're doing it for the preparation of understanding that like, hey, this is okay down here. This is not that bad. Right. I can eat a grilled cheese or whatever every day. And then after I did that business, it was great, made some money and stuff. And then I went to law school at Vanderbilt. And that's where I really got into trying to understand business at a deeper level. And I think that's something that people always wonder with me is like, why didn't you go to business school? Well, I really felt like that first business was kind of like an MBA for me, right? Maybe not in that I'm going to go into Goldman or somewhere like this and do that business, but I really was looking at all the things that they taught us as econ majors at West Point, right? It was like microeconomics applied. Like applied micro is like my first business, basically. Like, okay, well, I can go to this laundromat and I can get, 20 cents less per pound, which ultimately means like this, but actually, well, it's extra gas. So it, nets out, okay, well, actually, I'll just go to the place that's nearby. Like now that I do all the math, that's not, it's not worth it. Right. Exactly. And in law school is where I really started to take a more, I guess, academic approach to the business frameworks back like we were in econ again, where it's like, hey, we can kind of think about this on the laptop or in conversation before we even start moving. I tell people all the time, like with the mezcal business, it's like I went to Oaxaca. We'd already opened the brewery. So I was already wanting to do something. I almost opened another brewery in Mobile, Alabama.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was deep down.
That was when I was like, like when you shifted away from that, I was like, good.
Yeah. I mean, and looking back,
it wasn't your route. It wasn't your way.
It wasn't my route and it wasn't my way. But the other thing about it was sometimes, and this is what I encourage people about, I was going through the whole exercise though. So, hey, if I want to buy this business, how does it actually happen? I'm just going to take it all the way until I have to pay somebody. Right. So I'm scouting, and I mean, I paid some people, consultants to help me with thinking about it, architects to think about like, hey, if we convert this space, how much does it cost? How much? So I really felt that there was like 6 to 8 months that I spent as a big tactical exercise, just like we used to do, right? Like a mission walkthrough.
Developing the situation.
Exactly.
Developing the situation.
Exactly. And so even with the mezcal, I always tell people that I did it like the military taught me. I went through phases. So phase 1 of the operation was getting the business together, right? The legalities, the name, blah, 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 blah. Second part was like, okay, well, what are we making, right? Product development. And I had to go find the liquid. Where's the most likely source to find liquid? The distillers, right? So went around, found the distillers in Mexico, kind of figured out what I was going for and just took it step by step. So I think in 3 years, when I look back, or I started in April of 2021, kind of October 2020 with my overall business. And what I know is just that each time, just like you said, I kind of probed, just like they taught us. I probed. Then I was like, no, retreat. I probed. No, retreat. Until I found the right avenue of approach to attack the mission and get my outcome. And it's crazy to me that like these principles in business, like I really use every single concept like every day. And I really think that's also because we were in units and we're doing the type of army stuff where you really needed to know this like the back of your hand. And I think like you were saying, I was telling somebody the other day, like, hey, this life or death stuff, if it can keep you alive, it can put money in your pocket. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, look, this stuff in the life or death context and warfare really is that way. But in the money context, it's really not life or death, right? It's just whether I get my outcome or I don't get my outcome. So the stakes, ultimately, no matter how much they try to tell you, it's okay. You're going to keep going.
It's different. Yeah, it's different. You're not going to die. I do joke with people sometimes where it's like, having been to combat, you're like, yeah, in combat, the end state is just death, and you don't have to deal with any of the outcomes of it because you're dead. And business, it's like, you're not dead. So that's a good thing. But you have to clean up all these messes because they don't go away.
Sure. You still got the whole ledger of people that you owe money and all the rest of it. But I guess another thing that I want to ask you is like, okay, so back to that. We waxed poetic about how we got here. talked about West Point some. What about the people? What about the other West Pointers? How have they affected like your journey and been beneficial or not beneficial to all the things that you've had going throughout your career?
The people were the main reason why I stayed in the first place. So I'd say they were, essential to where I am today. You definitely realize that it's a team effort to get through pretty much everything in life. So I think the people there taught me that you really need to figuratively speaking, hold hands with your group and as a group, you have more energy and momentum than you do as an individual. So that was huge. And then just throughout the process, the people that pop into your life, if you're paying attention, they're the ones that kind of show you where that next direction is, or they can help you find it along the way. So, looking at West Point, I think I had a couple mentors there, and they definitely helped me kind of figure out what my leadership philosophy was to begin with. So I had an econ teacher, Colonel Peterson, and then I had one of those, I think it was like the PL 400 class where it was kind of a capstone for your military
officership.
Stuff. Yeah, officership. And I had to write a paper there and I think the teacher was Colonel Hebert. He was like a lieutenant colonel in the 80s. He was like an 82nd dude. Probably resold his original combat boot. That kind of guy. High and tight, intense, but very, very intelligent and intellectual in the classroom. And, we had to come up with a leadership philosophy. It was like, and you had to do it with your mentor. And I think I picked Colonel Peterson. And we would sit down and talk about this stuff.
What was it? You remember?
Oh yeah, it was humble confidence.
Yeah.
And so and that's kind of when I talk about the balance between tactical patience and action. So tactical patience is that humility component, and the action is that confidence component. So it's a constant kind of pendulum back and forth between the two. But I would have never been able to just pull that out of thin air, because I needed vocabulary, and to be honest, I needed some validation that was even a worthwhile idea. And so I think, at the academy, some of those professors and teachers really helped. And this is kind of true in any college, but they help. And this is, beyond West Point, I'll get to it. But, to get to that next phase of the operation, I needed a way to communicate what it is that I'm trying to do. So that, like we were talking about the other day, I needed to be able to have the vocabulary and the thought processes to establish, what does that look like?
Right.
What is the thing that I'm working towards? And I'd say, at West Point, I definitely, what am I trying to figure out? I'm trying to figure out how to be a leader.
Right.
Because I need to figure that out real fast, because I'm going to show up to the 173rd, and sure enough, I show up to the 173rd. I'm there for 2 months, and we're in Afghanistan.
Right.
And in the first month we're there, 2 or 3 officers had gotten killed right off the bat. And so it was and I would say 4 or 5 platoon leaders lost their jobs. So it was I need to figure this out, and the consequences are real. And so I think, and then once I was in the 173rd, as we've talked about, it's kind of a weird place. Tons of high performers. And, there were a few people that when I was there, probably more on the NCO front. And I think that's true for a lot of young lieutenants. I had a platoon sergeant, Sergeant Black, and he had been in the 2nd Ranger Battalion for 8 years, tons of experience. And I remember just showing up to Cop Chark in the middle of the night, first day of my platoon leader time. And I brought a bunch of snacks, and I started sitting down with them and just kind of listening. And that was that humble component. I show up and I don't know what to do really. I know what the book says, but you've been here for a while and you've been on 7 deployments. Can you help me? And I think that approach opened the door. And then when stuff would happen, you get a firefight or somebody gets hurt or something like that, now I have this relationship, and, he trusts me, and he trusts that I'm there to do my job. And I think he really helped me to take the things that I learned in the book and apply them in real life. Once I got out to 275, that was a test of humility. I definitely didn't have a very successful platoon leader experience and had to kind of start back down in the dirt. But this guy was just like, I heard about the last job you had. I don't really care about that. I just, I'm impressed by what you're doing now. And I think what that taught me was that if you fail, you can recover. If you fail, you can become better than you were before.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people listening, maybe like obviously I was 2011 originally, and then it became 2013 through a series of mishaps when I was a cadet. And honestly, ultimately, what's crazy is when you're the honor system at school, and when you get in trouble, I think when you're a cadet, sometimes it's like this really punitive experience. But one of the things I can really say about West Point is that when I got in trouble, everybody was like, this is really about your leadership development. And like, listen, like we think that you can be an exceptional leader, an exceptional, everything that you want to be. But right now, you're not doing that. Like you are not exhibiting the behavior or the things that we expect from you or someone in your stature or someone as a part of our community. And I think like when I look back at it and think about it that way, it's like, yeah, that's true. Like, right.
Yeah.
And I went to the 82nd. I saw my platoon leader there, who's I think still in the Army, Major James Rolfling, who is the best. Like I saw this guy and was like, oh, I understand why they put me out of school to go be enlisted for a second, because I see this guy now and there's no way that I was being this guy on a regular basis. You know what I mean? Like, no way. This guy is like what we sing about in the morning. This guy is doing like what he's like jumping out of my textbook. And that was such a life-changing experience for me. It was like, wow, okay. Like this is what it really looks like to be, a high-performing platoon leader. There's people like Jerome Banks, who was the BSNL, department head when I was younger, who really, I think, saved my young life and career, saved me from myself by just reminding me that how I got to West Point and how I had the relationships and the friendships and the mentors that I had was because I had been tuned into this frequency of excellence. And these are the type of things that happen when you go off frequency, and you need to like understand that and, do that for the rest of your life. And, don't be ashamed that you were off frequency. Just get back on the frequency. And that is like such a life-changing, idea. And so I try to do that at the same time when we're in this. Some days, like back half of 2023 for us was also awful, and I just every day have to think about like, hey, listen, where can I tune into the frequency and like get us back on track, like, or whatever is the situation. Or if I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, then that's it. That's just, I'm doing everything I can do to lead us to excellence. I'm trying to be disciplined and communicate. And, one of my big leadership philosophies is like clear and defined standards, right? If everybody knows, and that's also coming from the airborne community, right? If everybody knows what to do, then that's a great situation. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Right? No confusion. No confusion. Get out of the plane and like, no matter where you are, if you get knocked out, when you wake up, go to the Alpha. If we're not there, go to the secondary. Like,
yeah. Well, in the business, I say sua sponte all the time because I'm just like, I can't tell you what to do all the time. Like, where we're trying to go, just go there. Like, do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, or even like, my sponsor was Heist Gibson. He's a Harvard Business School professor nowadays. And there's just so much care. Like the sponsor system at West Point, I think is such a great idea. The professors, I couldn't really, I was being a hard-headed 19, 20-year-old when we were at school, but I'm just so thankful for all the professors that poured into me over the years. Like, I think, again, back to our economics degree, I'm fascinated by how advanced the level of understanding that they were pushing on us was, because I really felt like I understood a lot of things from a academic and theoretical level. And they ultimately are like that. I mean, the only thing that I think that we could have probably learned better in our econ department was like more marketing. But marketing changes so much that is hard for us I think at the undergraduate level to stay like right on top of the needle of like social media and everything else that's going on. What would be your advice if you had like somebody that was going in right now, right? And you were like, hey, when I was a cadet, if I could go back in time, you know what I mean? Like not to relive, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I would just like start rowing from the very beginning.
Yes.
And it's like, just go. And like, if you're like, I don't know, I'm going to do this, just like start figuring out how you're going to do it. Start like what you were talking about, the visual, what'd you call that?
Yeah. Visual planning systems.
Visual multitasking, like figure out what system works for you. And you need to start doing that in the first semester of your plebe year.
Yes.
And I would say that's something that I did well unconsciously. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like, I just need to get good grades. It seems like that's what I'm supposed to be doing here right now. And so I just started working as much as possible. Like I just treated it like a job. And I would recommend everybody going to the academy start looking at it like a job and not a college education, because to be frank, you're actually getting paid there. It is a job in some ways, far more than any of your peers at a regular school. It's very much like there's a job, it's a contract between you and the U.S. government. And because it's between you and the U.S. government, it's between you and every person in this country. Like you need to do a good job. They are paying for you to do a good job.
Yes.
And so I think realizing that as early on in the process as you can is very beneficial. And then, what I did at the academy is like, I just continued to try to find the hard things, because I felt like hard things that put you outside of your comfort zone. It's just like going to the gym. You have to break down the muscle to build the muscle. You have to break a bit before you can build. So, I had joined the Nordic Ski Team, and if anybody knows anything about, I did Nordic ski, and I'm from Georgia. I was a runner and I had done some downhill skiing, but I remember the tryout and I was just like, I think I had one of the fastest runs, but then we went and did the little roller ski things and I'm like covered in blood at the end of it, but I made the team. And I think it was because of that just drive and just not being scared of hard things. So I went to Saber school when I was there. And that was another thing where it was like, I don't know anything about any of this, but I felt like if I went through it, I might have a better idea of what it meant to be a leader. It might be, I could be more of what I was supposed to be there. So, and then also just kind of like reacting well to contact and take all the things that you are perceiving as bad and try to find the good in them. The parachuting crash, I could have gone a lot of different directions from that. And I think the way that we went was the most positive because I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about how horrible it was. I did spend some time thinking about that. Yeah. It's kind of inevitable when you're laying on a couch doped up on opioids for 3 months.
Yeah.
Like thinking about what it's going to be like to walk again. But, deciding that, this is reality and you have to do something with reality.
So what do you think is the next hard thing in your life? Where are we at on the mountain, on the side of the mountain right now? What's next for Sam?
Yeah. I mean, we're at a pretty significant an inflection point, I think. And I thought the inflection point would have happened last year, but I think the economy and just the way that getting businesses opens works, it always takes longer than you think. But I mean, honestly, for us right now, I was mentioning that I'm putting together this kind of a new technology where we take our spent grain from the brewery and we introduce mushroom mycelium for lion's mane. And we're essentially going to upcycle our waste and create a new product and have a whole new revenue stream. I think that right there is going to be like probably it's the 25 meter target right now. And then just kind of like figuring out what do we want to do with the Elsewhere brand next. We're exploring some stuff with the Adventure Club, but like the beer and spirits component of it, like there's so much more potential for the brand that we've built. It's not just like a neighborhood craft brewery brand, as I think Sara and I are starting to learn, because we're seeing how how well it travels to other industries, like the Adventure Club. I can already see how it's going to work with like the lion's mane mushroom, and then ideally getting into like a lot of the brain supplements that we can get from there. And then we've talked a lot about, you know, the different avenues in spirits that we could take the brand. So, I mean, I think the 25 meter target is getting this new business started, and that's going to be a pretty big push. Achieving stabilization in the 2 craft beer tap rooms, which should occur this year as well, once we let kind of foot traffic pick up this year, and as we finish renegotiating a lot of our leases and loans and stuff. So, but I feel like all that work's kind of been done. Like all that business stabilization, I did all the hard work on that last year. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, we're in the middle of doing distribution and placement of the product right around the country. So what I'm having the experience of is that we're winning a lot of awards, tasting awards, design awards. So we know we have a great product, but we have to get that product through all of the lengthy regulatory gatekeepers and relationship building. And so I think what keeps me focused, I'm always, we talk about this a lot, is like, I'm a really outcome-based person. That's what helps me stay through the fog of war, right? It's like wars over battles. And so anytime I'm in like a day that I'm just like, wow, this is so overwhelming, I'm like, hey, this is just a battle. We're going to try to fight through this like as much as we can. But even if we lose, it's okay. Tomorrow we like start back with what the situation is, and like we continue to fight for this overall war. I just posted on like the USMA Careers and Networking page the other day about, getting some limited partners and some brand ambassadors and whatnot. And again, the West Point community has been so lovely and so amazing, in their response. And I think it's just because of the trust that we build from the beginning in the system and the kind of mutual respect that you have. So even when it's, really dark, I always know that there's a loyal, kind of audience for what we have going on, who respect, our journey and kind of the leadership that we've learned and that we're applying. And so that's always helpful to kind of have that in the back. I try not to go and ask too much, right? But, I always feel very comfortable knowing that we have a large network of graduates who are supportive, who are interested in supporting grad-owned businesses and, getting involved in. Honestly, what I see the most from the community is that they're itching to start their own business, or they want to start a brand, or they want to, start a beer company or whatever it is. And so, getting involved with us is a way for them to get exposure to having those businesses without necessarily having to be the platoon leader, right? You get the updates and you get to kind of watch, monitor progress. But at the same time, you're able to invest in somebody that you trust, that they have the training and the outlook and the skills to bring about that outcome. Because I feel like often that's what people are asking me about, right? They're just like, okay, what's the outcome? You're doing all this, but are we selling the business, or what are you after? And once I explain, I'm like, hey, I'm after this. I feel like we're doing, we're building these brands for acquisition, blah, blah. Like, okay, what do you think is your likelihood of success? I was like, hey, if, as long as I'm alive, I'll be just working on this. So, I don't know, you know what I mean? So so far in my career, if I'm just sitting there working on it, no matter how bad it looks, no matter what the detours are, in the end, when you come back around to me, I should have whatever it was that we were working on. And that's I think the beauty of just, putting hard stuff in front of you. Like you said, it's just that after a while you become like, this is a 10-year problem and I'm in year 3.
It is.
And so ask me in 3 years. I don't know. I'm exactly where I should be at this juncture, kind of on this space. Well, I mean, I think this has been an excellent conversation. Great time to catch up with you. Always amazing. And look forward to continue to see how Elsewhere grows and continue to do business together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Devin.
Thank you for listening to the WPAOG Broadcast Network. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the show. And as always, join us for our next episode. Thank you for listening.